everyone. Welcome back to Truth or Demons podcast. It's Halloween, and don't argue with me, it's October. The whole month is Halloween. But for you guys, that means I busted my butt extra hard to bring you some super special Halloween episodes for the next week straight. So, I will not keep you waiting. Please enjoy this special interview with my friend Dan from Australia. I met Dan in 2016 at a paranormal event in Nashville. And we've stayed in touch since and seen each other grow in our respective directions regarding the paranormal. So please, enjoy our little chat. All right. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you today, Stevie?
Good. The fact that I was prepared for this blows my mind because I'm a mess all the time. I never know what's going on.
Look, it's very early in the morning as far as I'm concerned. Day off, so 10:30 in the morning is like 6 o'clock in the morning.
I understand. Yeah. Thank you for taking time from your day off to hang out with me.
Oh, no, you're very welcome. Very welcome.
All right. I'm going to ask you a few questions and we're going to just talk a little bit and then I'll let you go.
Sure.
All right. And I'm going to put this out with the Halloween episodes because I've got some fun questions at the end. So a little bit seasonal.
Okay, fantastic.
All right, first question. This is my favorite question to ask people. How did you get into the paranormal?
That's I'm not going to say it's a complicated story. I would say it all happened when I was about 14 years old. I was living in a small town called Narromine, which is about a 5-hour drive from Sydney. So this would have been 1986, 1987. And I was living in a small home with my mother and one of my older sisters. And we were sitting down watching Dallas one night. That's the one vivid memory I have. Dallas was showing on TV. So that goes to show how long ago it was. And we heard a thud come from the room behind us. It was a dining room behind us. And we all got up to see what was going on. We thought it might have been a cat or one of the dogs. But on the floor was a little tiny porcelain statue, one of 3 that my mother had brought home many years before that from Singapore. Now, these 3 statues were sitting on a mantelpiece directly above a sort of like a cast iron potbelly fireplace with tiles around it. And we thought it was strange that it was about 2 metres away from the fireplace itself, because if it had fallen off the mantelpiece, it would have hit either the cast iron stove or it hit the tiles around it and smashed to pieces. But it was about 2 metres across the room. And we're all quite puzzled, but you know what? Stuff happens. So, we put it out of our minds very quickly. The very next night, as we did as a family, once again, we were sitting down watching TV. It was about 9 o'clock at night. And we heard the same sort of thud again. So we all looked at each other thinking, you've got to be joking me. We got up, moved into the room behind us. And here was another one of the small ones. They're like a little porcelain lady. Same position on the floor. So the very next night, by this stage, we were all just freaking the fuck out. By the third night, we stood in the I suppose the archway to this next room, and we watched the mantelpiece, eagle-eyed. The one last statue that was there was a big, taller one, which looked exactly the same as the smaller ones. They were lined up on the mantelpiece. And lo and behold, same time of night, round about 9 o'clock, this last one just sort of spiraled across the room as if being pushed by some invisible wind or force, and just spiraled across the room, same position on the floor, and we just all freaked out. And the first thing that entered our heads, as you would be, oh, my God, there's a ghost in the house. And that's where my paranormal journey started, when I was about 14.
I love that story. That's amazing. The fact that it happened 2 times in a row.
It still sends chills up my spine today, every time I tell the story.
Wow. And so you were hooked from then, I imagine, about what the heck was it? How do we figure it out?
Well, yeah, of course, this was back in the 80s. So, unless you were, super comfortable, had a bit of money behind you, no one had video cameras in their houses. No one had we didn't have cameras like we do today on our phones ready to go. So none of this was caught on film. We told friends and family who all thought, wow, that's incredibly strange. And it was only years later, actually probably only about 15 years ago, when we were at a family gathering and I was retelling this story with my mother and my sister there, who witnessed the same thing on that night. And I was told that when I was a child, when I was about probably about 3 or 4, every Sunday afternoon we would go to my grandparents' house. It was like a tradition, and the whole family would be there. The typical Sunday roast would be put on. We'd all sit down, have dinner together. And then myself, my uncle and my grandfather would all retire to the adjacent room, which was the lounge room, where the TV was, and we'd sit down and watch TV while all the ladies stayed in the sunroom where we used to have dinner. And I remember every now and again while we'd be watching TV, my grandfather would get up and knock on the wall to the adjacent room and go, ooh, and I didn't know what he was doing back then. But I found out that regularly after dinner, the women folk would hold seances after dinner in that room, which absolutely blew my mind. And it put a different light of the way I looked at the rest of my family, thinking, oh my God, are you guys crazy? It was, really weird.
Oh, that's a great story too. I love that so much. I would have been the one that when I learned that, I've been like, why didn't you invite me?
Well, I was only 3 or 4 at that stage. So, my family got up to some weird stuff and I had no idea.
Wow. That's really cool to know. Man, if I learned that about my family, I'd be so excited. I love stories like that. That's so would you consider that moment your most memorable paranormal experience, or is there another one that comes to mind?
I think to this day that is 100% what I would classify as the most weird moment. I've thought about it obviously ever since then. The way I've looked at it today compared to the way I used to look at many years ago has changed. But as far as paranormal moments go, that's definitely the most memorable.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, I do want to talk about how things have changed for you, but before we get there, I wanted to know, when do you first remember hearing about Ed and Lorraine Warren?
Jeez, probably watching the Amityville Horror for the first time when I was about 12 years old. Didn't really dig too much into the paranormal back then, but I did love my scary movies. And it wasn't until years later, after that experience that I had when I was 14, that I started to delve into the paranormal, people seeking it out, and the names of Ed and Lorraine Warren came up, and that's when I connected it to the Amityville Horror. So that would be my first introduction to those two renowned names.
All right, I like that. So that is a very common answer. Actually, a lot of people associate them with Amityville. So once you did learn about them, what were your thoughts then?
It's a tricky question. Fascinated at first, and then as the years go on, the stories that you hear, and as you can see when they do the those movies at the moment, the Conjuring movies, where Ed and Lorraine are front and center of all those movies, you sort of think to yourself, is this very close to how they actually were in real life? Was everything a demon? Was everything that happened caused by a demon type entity? Was everything, something to do with Satan and hell and everything else? And because it just seemed, every time I read a story, every time I saw an interview, every time I watched a movie, that's the way it always lent. And it wasn't just some normal, typical haunting that was either a residual haunting or an intelligent haunting or just the old typical haunted house story. It always had to lean towards some sort of demonic possession, demonic case. And that's when I started to raise questions about their validity within the paranormal field.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. In the research I've been doing, that comes up a lot, how at first, when they were very new to it, it was ghosts. They were looking for spirits. They were looking for ghosts. They were trying to communicate, trying to help them cross over whatever needed to be done. Then all of a sudden, everything was demonic, and there was no room for questioning it. So it's an interesting evolution of their endeavors.
Well, how do you question something like that? It's a really great way of telling a story and getting people on board with what you do, because you don't have to provide any form of evidence for something like that.
Right. It's faith-based, religion-backed. So
all about belief.
If you are so devout that you blindly believe in your faith without question, which a lot of people do, it's real easy for that to translate into the demon thing, and there's no reason in their minds to question it, so they just take it as it's told to them.
Exactly. Well, within the paranormal community, there's always been a certain amount of trust with the people that you've worked alongside, that you've investigated alongside. And luckily for me, during my time investigating, I would say that 99% of people are on the level. They're not there to fake stuff. They're not there to put one over on you or pull your leg. These are great people. But of course, as we've seen in the age of the internet and paranormal reality shows, it's all about viewers and shock value.
Yes, I agree completely. And just a lot of drama recently. There is so much drama amidst the community to try and be, I don't, bigger and better. Like, they want to be famous. They want to be,
try and one up themselves.
Yes. And then the stories start to get more outrageous and everything. And that's been interesting to watch happen. So since the movies came out and they portrayed the Warrens in this way that a lot of people took as gospel, like they thought, oh, that's really how the Warrens were. It took a lot of people starting to look into it to start to understand, oh no, that's just a movie. And so knowing that and having been in the paranormal for a very big chunk of your life, how do you feel about knowing that the Warrens, like what they were about and the truths about them are coming out? And then how do you feel about people just coming into the scene and seeing the movies and that being their introduction to the Warrens?
Well, I think that's how a lot of people get their start in the paranormal to kick the whole thing off. They get interested, they see a movie, then they watch something like Ghost Hunters or Ghost Hunters International or what's the show with Ghost Adventurers with Zach Backens, which is a whole nother story you could get into.
Yeah.
It's as you mentioned earlier, it all comes down to belief, and that's why I personally investigated. I 100% believed that ghosts were real. There was no other explanation for anything that could happen in regards to the paranormal within a home, outside in the skies, out in the bush, wherever. And I was very strong in those beliefs until I started to, what's the best way to put this without offending anyone? There are other belief sets out there which I don't subscribe to, as you well know. And I thought to myself, I have to hold my beliefs in the paranormal to the same account I do these other beliefs, because just like this one, there's no evidence for the paranormal existing. Unfortunately, I believe that there are things we can't explain. Is it ghostly? Is it paranormal in nature? Who's to know? But no one's gotten a Nobel Peace Prize yet for proving it. So who knows?
That is my favorite thing, what you just said, because it irks my nerves to watch things like the TV shows, movies that claim the story came from a true story, where they're telling you like it's in a rule book somewhere. This means this, that means that. This is demonic. This is benevolent. This is benevolent. This is like all these things they're telling you, and they never leave it open for question. They never leave it open for interpretation, because they want you to believe what they're telling you. And so it irks my nerves for that to happen, because nobody knows those answers. There's no record of the proof of that.
That's right. And when you do question it, all you get is, you just have to have an open mind.
Yeah.
And I remember who was it? Brian Cox, the astrophysicist, who once famously said on a TV show I was watching in some debate here in Australia, and he said, it's great to have an open mind, but not so much that your brain falls out.
Yeah, exactly. You got to have the parameters. You have to just think critically and with the open mind at the same time. It's okay to be critical in your thinking and also be open to what you're hearing and taking in. Because if you're not being critical about what you're taking in, then you're just kind of being a zombie. Basically,
you're just deluding yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And there's no growth in that. There's no benefit to you or anybody else in that. So it's really frustrating that they're still perpetuating this idea that there are rules that we must listen to and abide by. So yeah, I love that you said that. So what is your favorite thing about the paranormal?
Honestly, I think it's the people. I have met some wonderful people and made some great friends within the paranormal community. I've been invited to locations which I never thought I'd ever step foot in because of the connections that I've made within the paranormal field here in Australia. Also, because through those connections and doing these things and being, obviously, the paranormal fascinates everyone, whether you're a believer or not. The paranormal fascinates everyone. And if you're in a small town and someone finds out that you're a paranormal investigator or a ghost hunter, there is prick up. So, I've had the local paper, I've had real estates, I've had TV stations, and I think a lot of paranormal researchers within Australia have experienced the same stuff. People are really interested in what you do. What exactly are you looking for? What's your end game? And that's always exciting, talking to people who want to know more about what you do. Although lately, a lot of the interviews that I've had with whether it be papers or radio stations or TV programs, get a little bit disappointed that I'm quite skeptical about it all.
Yeah, I love that though. I love that you are skeptical, but still open to conversation about things.
Well, it's the one thing you can always say is that, it's okay to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's okay to say, I don't know.
I wish more people felt that way. I wish people didn't feel such a need to give the definitive answers and be the one to give them.
That's the thing. The thing is, you can't give a definitive answer. It is the paranormal, and we were talking about it. There is no proof. There is no evidence. No one's received a Nobel Prize for providing such evidence. So you just can't. So the only answers you can come up with are the actual answers that you find for the reasons why people may think they're experiencing a paranormal event, very logical reasons. Or you can just say, look, I'm not a scientist. There is possibly other reasons. I just can't find them, so I don't know.
Yeah, and that's perfectly acceptable, and I wish happened more, especially on the media, where people are taking that in.
Well, I suppose no one's going to watch a TV show where everything's explained away. Right. It is for entertainment value, but unfortunately, there are people who will watch it and won't take it with a grain of salt. They'll just believe everything that they see.
Yep, that happens more often than people realize, I think, too.
Yes, 100%.
So in your experience in investigations you've done and such, and your own like personal life experience in the paranormal, have you ever come across anything you would consider a legit find? I don't want to say evidence because, like you said, there's no proof, so it wouldn't be considered evidence, but was there anything that made you really, really say, that might be something?
There's been a couple of times where, I just couldn't explain what was going on, and also trying to critically think about the occurrence. I was doing a private investigation a couple of hours north of here. I was invited by a couple who said there were strange noises and things being moved in the house at night that they couldn't explain. They weren't scared. They weren't worried about anything. They were just generally curious as to what was going on. And they said, can we invite you up to check these things out? I said, yeah, sure, not a problem at all. So I turned up there, and typical country people, they were off to Sydney for the weekend. They said, look, the house is yours. Help yourself to anything in the fridge, and just, take notes and tell us what you find. So it was it was the early hours of the morning. I can't remember exactly what time, but I was sitting at a kitchen table. I wasn't turning on any lights, and thanks to their invitation, I opened their fridge and got myself a little midnight snack. And I left the fridge door open just to have that residual light coming out. And I sat down at the table and I started having a bit of a munch. And the chair opposite me moved, I'm going to say an inch and a half, just by itself. I wasn't startled. I looked at the top of the chair and thought, well, that's interesting. I got up, closed the fridge door, turned on all the lights in the kitchen. They had exposed floorboards, so I started jumping up and down on the floorboards. Not that I was jumping up and down originally. I was just sitting on a chair. I sat back down on the chair and rocked back and forth to see if there was a loose floorboard that may have moved the chair. And for the life of me, over the next 15 minutes, I couldn't replicate that movement. So in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't sound like a big deal, but that's something that always enters my head. What made this chair move by itself? Don't know. Don't know. That was the only thing that happened in the house, by the way.
Oh, okay. And how long were you there for?
I was there, I got there at about 6:30 at night. I was there until about 11 o'clock the next morning.
Okay.
Bit of sleep in between too.
Okay, I like that you said that was the only thing that happened. I had to ask the time frame because in my experience, especially when I was younger, when we'd pay to go on these investigations with a paranormal investigating group, and you'd go in thinking something's going to happen because they kind of advertise that you'll get an experience. They don't really tell you how investigating actually goes. And so you go in and you're expecting things to just pop off all the time everywhere. So for you to say you went to this thing and this legitimate thing you can't explain happened, but it was the only thing, that reinforces for other investigators, I think, who are trying to show people it can happen just one time. It can happen not at all. You can be there for days and days and not get anything. You could be there for an hour and get a couple things. But I love that just that one thing happened for you.
And and that's the other thing in regards to a lot of people saying, well, why don't you have more stuff on camera? If the paranormal exists, why wouldn't you be catching a lot? And I think in regards to, if you were going to consider these occurrences truly paranormal, I think you have to be Johnny on the spot for these things to happen, because once again, trying to prove it, you can't replicate these things because it happens so, I think, infrequently. It's in an uncontrolled environment, so you can't really look at it from a scientific point of view because everything's uncontrolled. The only way you could do it controlled would be in a lab, and then it's not a haunted location, is it?
Right, exactly.
So you have to be Johnny on the spot for these things to happen. You have a lot of people claim that things just happen all the time, and I have been to locations where there seems to be a cacophony of paranormal activity, whether that's just natural phenomena, things like infrasound caused by the wind, or, traffic in the background, or just the fact that the place is old and it will move and it will creak and it will make sounds that are unfamiliar to the ear. Who knows?
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's important for paranormal investigators, when they're trying to get into it, to remember that there are so many outside factors that are not considered paranormal, like noises that can come from 100 things that are legitimate things. So that gets lost a lot, I think. And I also think it gets lost in excitement, because I know when I do investigations, if something happens that gets me excited, my logic kind of goes out the window for a minute, and I have to bring myself back to reality, because you get so pumped up knowing that something you might not be able to explain just happened in front of you.
Exactly. In the moment, for that first few seconds or even a minute, you are excited, you are pumped. But then the brain kicks in and you're like, hang on a second, what are the other possibilities?
Yes.
And more than likely, all these other possibilities that you think of are more probable.
Exactly. And very, very least likely, it's a demon.
Of course.
All right. So how do you feel about the paranormal currently? What is your perspective of it now, after all you've seen and done in the paranormal community?
Well, as I was mentioning earlier, talking about how I started to turn skeptical, where I started to hold the paranormal to the same account as other beliefs that I discount. It was sort of like a moment of clarity, sitting outside one day with my dog. And that is the one thing, during my years as a paranormal investigator, there would be times during the day where I would spend 10 to 15, maybe even 20 minutes per day, where I would go out and think about these things, which is weird, but I'd just sit in solitude with my dog next to me, and I would just let my brain wander. So I thought about a type of paranormal experience such as residual sound. So for other people wondering, who may not be familiar, residual sound is like, or a residual haunting is a haunting that is not intelligent. It's something that is, I suppose, a scar on the atmosphere through repetition, or what the paranormal enthusiasts say is a traumatic event. And then you've got your intelligent hauntings where the ghost knows it's self-aware, it knows you're there, it can interact with you. Residual sounds are like when you go to Tombstone in Arizona and people say they hear gunshots at night and scuffles around the OK Corral. They say that's a traumatic event that has permanently scarred the atmosphere, and in the right atmospheric conditions, you can hear these things happen from the past. So I thought to myself, let's go and see if we can find an example of residual sound. So there is a place not far from me, which recently it was probably about 6 years ago now, where a horrific accident occurred. I'm not going to get into the details of the accident because I think that's a little bit disrespectful. But I set out to go to this scene. It's on a highway. There's plenty of Australian bush around the highway, so I was able to set myself up away from the highway with nothing but a digital recorder. And I would go to this location between 4 and 6 times a week, anywhere from half an hour to 20 minutes, depending on the night. Sometimes I would go during the day at different times, and I did this for almost 12 months. I did it 6 months before the anniversary of the event that occurred, and almost 6 months after the anniversary of the event that occurred. So there is a popular way of thinking within the paranormal that on birthdays, specific dates of events, anniversaries, that the paranormal ramps up. It seems to know how time works, which is really weird to me when I started thinking about it. Excuse me. So I went a few days for extra time before the anniversary and after the anniversary, and I went on the exact time in which the accident occurred as well. So for all these hours upon hours upon hours of recording, I got nothing. And this was typically a location and an event which should, by all rights, according to everyone's theories, produce residual sound. I got nothing. I got passing cars. I got wildlife within the bush. You could hear them. I got wind. I got rain. I got many things. I didn't hear screeching tires. I didn't hear breaking glass. I didn't hear screams. I didn't hear any of that. And that, to me, was something that I think I was happy to debunk straight away. I went, you know what? Residual sound doesn't exist. If it's going to occur, it's going to occur here. It's also more than likely going to occur at this time. And it just didn't. Now, I had an online, I'm not going to say argument, I'm going to say a debate with Grant Wilson from Ghost Hunters.
Okay.
And he said to me that just because something doesn't happen when you want it to doesn't mean it won't. And I'm like, you're totally not understanding what I was trying to do in the first place. Do you know how many hours I was there? He just wouldn't have it. I think he was more disappointed in the fact that I had shelved that idea. I went, you know what, tick, I've crossed that off my list, which is a very rare thing to do within the paranormal community, is to tick something off your list and go, don't need to look at that anymore. So just from that alone, I started looking at the paranormal through very different eyes.
I can't blame you for that, because when you put that much time and effort, which I can say I've not heard of many investigators doing that much consistent work on one idea. So for you to be satisfied with the results you got to the point where you can you don't need to investigate it anymore, and someone else say, no, you need to, that seems silly to me, because you put in all the work. If they believe it still needs investigated, maybe they should try and see how they feel after a year of this same repetitive trying to get one thing. There was one simple thing you were trying to do. So I would completely understand you being done with it when after a year was up. So I think people just don't like to let go of their ideas. It's really hard for people to.
It's also when you have believed so hard that certain things exist and certain things happen that you can't explain, when you start to get comfortable with the idea that maybe it doesn't exist, it's like a weight coming off your shoulders. As I said, ticking off that box. I mean, the one thing I used to love while I was paranormal investigating, actually two things that would occur that you go, ooh, that's a bit spooky. But I would get more excited when I figured out a rational explanation for what was going on. I'd go, great, I'm not deluding myself. How good's that?
I agree so much. When I'm doing research and I come across something that people are really adamant about being true, haven't really looked into it, never, done a deep dive, and I do a deep dive and I find explanations. And I'm like, this is amazing, because now I can show why this idea is the way it is and why it shouldn't be perceived that way. So
But there will always be people who, like that conversation with Grant Wilson, who will just dispel it at every turn. You're not going to convince a true believer. It's just, I think it's an exercise in futility. If they are a true believer, it won't matter the amount of evidence and proof or what you have found. It won't convince them. It just won't.
I completely agree. I'm a firm believer in not arguing, because the chances of you changing the person's mind that you're arguing with is pretty slim, and you're wasting a lot of energy. It's okay to have a discussion and it's okay not to agree, but don't start getting so heated and trying to push your beliefs on another person, because that gets you nowhere.
Well, we're seeing it in real time, not getting into specifics, but we're seeing what's happening maybe in your part of the world.
Yeah, for sure.
We're seeing that play out in real time. So
Yes, and it's always true. You're not going to win, like, you're not going to change the person's mind you're arguing with any of your arguments. It's on them. It's totally up to them whether they want to believe it or not, or change their mind or not. It's not up to you.
The other big thing is well, you can't prove it doesn't exist. And I'm like, well, you can't prove a negative. But once again, they'll go off on some tangent and try and explain it away.
Yeah. People are unbendable sometimes. There's no give.
No give.
So, if you could give advice to someone trying to get into paranormal investigation, what advice would you give them?
Wow. Okay. I would have normally said, right, be open to every possibility. But now I would be like, just remember, anything is possible, just not probable. You have to be true to yourself. If you go into this thing absolutely 100% believing ghosts exist, that's fine. But don't think everything that occurs at a location is going to be the result of a ghost. More than likely, it is going to be something else. Be true to yourself. Don't delude yourself, because when something possibly truly paranormal occurring, that's when you can prick your ears up and go, this is what I've been waiting for. So, yeah, don't delude yourself. Be true to yourself.
That is amazing advice. I love that a lot. Okay, so you are from Australia, and for many people around the world, we all have our stories that we attach to that's like either local or close by. Do you have one of those stories?
Sort of an Australian paranormal story.
Yeah, that you love. It doesn't have to be paranormal. It could be like a cryptid or a mystery, or it's something that got you really intrigued at any point in time that really stood out to you.
Geez, that is hard. I mean, I suppose Australia is very similar to America in that aspect, that we all have our UFO stories. There's a place out here in the middle of Australia called Pine Gap, which is synonymous with UFO stories. We have our own version of Bigfoot. It's called the Yowie. And those stories come from the Indigenous people, the Aborigines of Australia. And I have a couple of friends who really love investigating the cryptid sort of stuff. We have it's reputed as Australia's most haunted house, most haunted private residence, I should say. And it's a place called Monte Cristo, which I've been a couple of times. I don't think it's haunted. I think it's a tourist trap. But anyway, but something, and I think, like I said, there are so many similarities. We have the haunted hitchhiker stories over here, which I'm sure are all around the world. We have the crisis apparitions, which appear at the end of beds before someone has passed away. We have those stories. I can't think of anything in particular which is something that really got me interested, besides my own experiences within the paranormal. Yeah, they're everywhere. They're everywhere. Those sorts of stories.
Yes, I agree completely. So, do you believe in any cryptids?
I'm going to have to say no. If the Yowie does exist, it is like Bigfoot, the champion of hide and seek. It's never been filmed. It's never been caught on camera. And if it does exist, if someone does find evidence of the Yowie, I would hope they wouldn't share it with the world, because I could only imagine that the moment hardcore evidence is presented, you'd have every idiot with a gun out there trying to shoot this thing. So if it is real, stay hidden, Yowie. Stay hidden. And to anyone who captures footage of it, don't release it.
Yeah, do the right thing. We actually have, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but there are places in America that ban they banned hunting Bigfoot. It is a crime to hunt Bigfoot. So
wow, that's awesome.
Isn't that cool? I think the main underlying idea is so no one shoots someone in a costume, like for safety reasons.
Yes, that's a fair point.
Yeah, I think that's where it stems from. But yeah, it's a lot of places. No hunting Bigfoot. So
yeah, well, at least they're thinking about safety, so that's a good thing.
Yes, I agree, and they understand that it's such a widespread idea.
Yeah, there is one. It's not technically a cryptid. You might have heard of the Tasmanian tiger. It was a marsupial tiger, I suppose, dog sort of thing that had stripes, the thylacine. I think it died out sometime in the 1920s. That was in Tasmania through, I think back in the late 1800s, there was a bounty put out on Tassie tigers, and every farmer and every shooter just went out and decimated the population. And the last remaining one died in a British zoo in the 1930s or the 1940s. Could have been earlier. But the hunt for the Tasmanian tiger is still on, and there are still people out there looking for it. And there's also the question of, if we can get the DNA, should we bring this sort of thing back? To which I say, well, no, unfortunately, it's extinct. It's extinct because of human action. And we have to realise that once a species is gone, it is gone, and we need to learn from that. If we start bringing these things back, nothing's precious anymore. So if the people go out and they start logging all the forests and end up killing all the koalas and turn around and say, it's okay, we can just bring them back through, DNA. No, let's just learn from it and move on. But yeah, there are people out there still hunting for the Tasmanian tiger. I think personally that it's gone. We decimated it and it's not returning. But because it's also gone, there are other species out there on the island of Tasmania that are now flourishing because of its disappearance. So, swings and roundabouts.
Yeah. No, I agree with you about there's so many, I think, negative things that could come from bringing it back, because you're reintroducing it and it's not familiar with the surroundings, and its surroundings are not going to be familiar with it. So it can cause all kinds of issues.
The environment has changed, the climate has changed. And have we not watched Jurassic Park?
Yeah, exactly.
It's just wrong on every level.
Agreed. Okay, so I have just a couple more questions for you. Since Halloween is right around the corner, what is your favorite thing to do for Halloween?
Oh, look, in Australia, Halloween's not a massive thing. It's not big, although in the last 20 years, it has gained traction. So we do have a lot of houses in the area, in the cities all around Australia now. They have Halloween events. My wife and my son are heading off down to Melbourne in a couple of weeks. My son's a massive Godzilla fan, and for the 70th anniversary, they're having a big 4-day weekend, which includes a Halloween event with trivia and all that sort of stuff. So look, yeah, I like to dress up the house. I like to get dressed in. I don't know if you can see it. Oh no, you can't. I've got them hidden. Probably behind me there. I'm a big fan of Michael Myers, so I like to dress up as Michael Myers and scare the kids that come to the front door. My daughter loves it. It's her favourite time of year. She's a chip off the old block. She loves her scary movies. And during October, whenever they're not at school, on weekends, we will sit there and go, all right, which horror movie are we watching tonight? So October's a month for watching scary movies. But I also, where I work, host trivia every Wednesday night. And because Halloween's on a Thursday this year, we'll have a Halloween bash for trivia. So the punters will turn up dressed up. We'll have a couple of Halloween rounds. We'll have treats to give to the kids. So, yeah, it's always a lot of fun. Always a lot of fun.
That sounds awesome. I love that so much. I love when people have stuff that they do and that they look forward to for this time of year, because it's always been my favorite holiday. So you mentioned movies. My very favorite thing to do is watch movies, mostly scary movies. do you have a very favorite scary movie that you could pinpoint?
Halloween.
Yeah.
No contest. The original Halloween. I've got so much Halloween stuff up on the walls. It's, it is my favourite movie, and it's not gory. Not that I'm have an aversion to gore. I love it. It's not full of swearing, and I swear like a fucking trooper. So I'm not averse to that. But it is a very simple story, well told. The atmosphere of that movie, the lighting, the tension, it is just, and the way it ends is just brilliant. Subsequent Halloween movies have been very ordinary, but yeah, that will always hold a special place in my heart. Halloween 1978.
I can totally understand that. My favorite that I always have no hesitation with is Carrie. That has been my favorite scary movie forever, just because of the telekinetic aspect. Every little
yes, of course.
Well, every kid probably who was, the outcast or got picked on just dreams of being able to have those moments. So that was always my favorite.
Excellent. Yeah, with Stephen King, you can't go wrong.
Agreed. Okay, I'm out of questions, but before I end my interviews, I like to ask my guests if there is anything at all they would like to share with the viewers and listeners about the paranormal, about anything you're into, any direction, anything at all.
Geez, wow. Well, I'm not as active on the investigating front as I used to be. Unfortunately, about almost 5 years ago, we had the Black Summer bushfires here in Australia. Unfortunately, we lost our house. I lost all my paranormal equipment, which I look to now as a bit of a godsend. I'm like, I don't have to worry about all those bits of kit which light up and whir and don't detect ghosts whatsoever. So that would be the big thing I'd like to tell anyone thinking about getting into the paranormal field as well, just as a follow-on of being true to yourself. Stay away from the purpose-built paranormal equipment. It's not designed to detect ghosts, because if it was, we'd know that ghosts exist, we'd know how to detect them, and there'd be no need for that equipment. Those bits of kit detect everyday phenomena, which we also launch onto the back of ghosts. So don't spend your hard-earned cash on bits of plastic with speakers and lights on them. If you want to use paranormal equipment, use your own. Go old school. That's what I've been doing. Every now and again when I go out, I get some cheap bits of wooden dowel. I put a suction cup on the bottom of them. I stick some fishing bells onto the top. I stick them onto the floor. And if a ghost can interact with a electronic bit of kit, then surely it can knock a piece of light dowel and make the bells move. I've never had any interaction with it, but if I do, that's way more impressive.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because I agree. I don't like how much stock gets put into the electrical stuff when we live in such an electrical world. Everything around us can influence that equipment, and at any moment, at any time.
That's right. Exactly. So go old school, stay away from the tech. It is, and I'm not afraid to say it, it's a waste of money.
That's great advice. Oh my gosh, Dan, thank you so much for coming on my show. I'm so glad we got to do this. I hate that our time zones are so wide in when we're awake. It doesn't always line up. So I'm glad we got to do this.
What time is it over there?
It is now 7:34, so it's good. This is a good time, as long as like if you were working a day job, it wouldn't be good. So this is the good time where it's not too early for you, it's not too late for me, and it works out pretty good.
Excellent. Well, happy Halloween to you and everyone watching.
Thank you so much. I will let you know when this is all ready and I put it out. It will be the last week of October. I'm going to do what I did last year and just put a bunch of episodes out for everyone to enjoy.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure, Stevie.
You're so welcome, and thank you. And I'm so glad it's been like 8 years since we met at a paranormal event and we've been able to stay in touch.
I can't believe it's been that long.
Yeah, I went and looked it up today.
By.
I was like 2016, wow. Yep.
Jesus.
Alrighty, I will let you go for now, and I will let you know when this is going to be out.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
See you later.
See you, Stevie.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Dan, for joining me. This was so much fun, and we absolutely must do it again soon. If anyone has any questions for Dan or suggestions for discussion topics for next time, drop them in the comments or hit me up on social medias. You can also email me at truthordemonspodcast@gmail.com. Until next time.